All right, welcome back. And today we are going to talk about control flows, part 2. Now, last time when we looked at control flow, we learned about the conditional control flow. So basically, in a conditional, what you have is if some condition is met, then do X. Otherwise, do Y. For example, what we did was, if you are over 18, then welcome to my website. If you are not over 18, then you cannot join my website. So that's pretty much a conditional control flow. Now today we're going to learn a new kind of control flow. It's called loops. Now as you can see here on the screen, this is basically a loop control flow. Now let's just go through it and see how it works. So we start here, and then what we want to do is we want to eat an apple. That is the first instruction. And after that instruction, the arrow says we should say thanks, because you have to be polite. Now, after that, the arrow goes to this control flow structure where it says, are there apples left? And then there are two answers. Either there are apples left or there aren't. So if there are no more apples, then you end it right here. Quite simple. It's just a linear line. But if there are apples left, what you would do is you would go back to this instruction, eat apple, and then also say thanks. And then you would ask the question again. So let's run this again. Imagine if you have 5 apples, and then first you eat an apple. So now you have 4 apples, and then you say thanks. And then are there any apples left? Yes, there are 4 left. And then because it's yes, you go back here, you eat another apple, you say thanks. Are there apples left? Yes. And then 2 apples left. You eat an apple, say thanks. Are there any apples left? Yes. 1, and then finally 0. And then once you have 0 and you ask, are there apples left? You say no, and you end it here. Now there's actually a bug in this control flow. And if you find it, that's great. And then if not, don't worry about it, because we are going to convert this into Python code, and then we will see where the issue is. Now, as you can see, how many times have I gone through this loop? Or how many times did I say thanks? 5 times, because there were 5 apples. And each time I go through this loop, 1, 2, 3, each time I go through this loop, it's called one iteration. So that's some vocabulary for you. So each loop, we call it one iteration. All right, let's go to the code now. All right, so we have the function eat apples, and what we want to do is to copy this control flow into a function eat apples. So first, what do? Let's define a variable called apples remaining is simply the number of apples, because if you have 5 apples, then the apple remaining is 5. And then according to this control flow, you want to eat an apple. So eat apple. And how do I do that? I'm going to do apples remaining equals apples remaining minus 1. Because once you eat an apple, you get 1 fewer apple. And then what you want to do, actually, let's write some comments, because this is good practice. So eat an apple. It might not be very clear for some people, so we can add comments. And then next, what do we want to do? Say thank you. So we print thank you. All right. And now here comes the loop. So here's the magic keyword. The magic keyword is while. Now in Python, you can actually create loops in many different ways, but for this lesson, I will teach you the while loop. For the next lesson, you'll learn other kind of loops and also some other tricks that you can do with them. But for now, we will stick to the while loop because it's the most easy to understand, and it's also the most fundamental one to understand. So remember what we saw on this chart. It says, are there apples left? So let's do the same thing. So how you use the while loop, you write while to start your loop, and then you write a condition. And what was the condition? Apples remaining bigger than 0. That means that there are still apples left. If apples remaining is bigger than 0, that means there are still apples. So what this while loop does is it's going to execute everything that is within the while loop. So that means anything that is right here. So for example, if I do apples remaining equals apples remaining minus 1 and print thank you. So while this is true, it is going to execute these two statements. Once these two statements are done, it will actually go back to the top and see if this statement is still true. As long as it's still true, it will keep looping. It will keep iterating through this. And then once we were out of the loop, we do these things. We just return, right? So you could say print done, for example, just so that you can understand. All right, let's run this. So how this works, eat apples. If we input 5, as you can see, it's gonna say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now I forgot to put this guy here, the exclamation point, but it's actually easier for you to understand what's going on. So the first thank you, I execute it right here. It says thank you. And then once I'm on the loop, apples remaining, how many apples did I have? I have 4 because I already ate one here. So 4 is bigger than 0, that's great. So I'm gonna execute these two commands, and then apples remaining equals apples remaining minus 1, which means I ate an apple. So now I have 3 apples, and then I print thank you. So that's the first one. And then apples remaining bigger than 0, yes, because now I have 3. Back then I had 4, now I have 3, but it's still bigger than 0. So it's gonna keep looping until apples remaining becomes 0. Once it's 0, it's finally done. So that's why it will print done. Let me show you something pretty neat. So as you can see, I'm gonna modify this line to be this, and it's actually going to be the same thing. This is actually a shorthand. If you have an operator and equal sign right next to each other, it means that you're gonna do that. You're gonna basically subtract 1 to yourself, to your own variable. So that means it's the same thing as this, but just shorthand, so it looks cooler. That's what we call synthetic sugar. We run that again. Eat apples, 5. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Done. All right, so remember when I said something about there should be a bug there. Well, the bug, if you think about it, and when I start, I'm gonna eat an apple. And then as long as there are apples left, I'm gonna go back. But what if there were no apples to start with? Then how am I gonna eat apple? That actually doesn't make any sense, right? And I won't be saying thanks because I'm not eating any apples. So this is actually kind of wrong. So the right way of doing it is taking this guy right here, and then these guys here, take this guy over here. So now, instead of doing the actions first, I ask the question right away, are there apples left? And then if it's yes, then I am going to do the action. And then after I say thanks, I actually ask the question again. And then if there are no apples left, then I will go straight to the end. So as you can see, if there are 0 apples, then it's gonna go straight to end. And if there are apples, it's gonna go eat apples, say thanks. And then after say thanks, it will ask the question again. For example, if you ate the last apple right here, so it becomes 0, and then you ask, are there any apples left? No, and then it's going to end it. All right, let's modify our code. So as you can see, if I did eat apple 0, it's still gonna say thank you, like you would eat the apple. So that is actually wrong. And then at the end of the function, you could also print apples remaining to see that it is wrong, because you're gonna get -1 apple, which doesn't make any sense because you can't eat apples when there are 0 of them. So there you go. There's a bug. And also, if you think about it, if you eat 1 apple, it still says thank you 1 time. So 0, it should be 0 time. So how would you change that? So as you can see, we wanted to ask the question earlier on. So what we're gonna do is we are going to delete this part, and then we are going to, oh, I deleted too many lines. So I'm gonna add this line back. Okay, all right, number of apples. So then while apple remaining's 0, then I'm gonna eat 1 and say thank you. And then once it's done, it's done. Okay, this should work. All right, eat apples. Let's say 5, it should say thank you 5 times, great. If it's 1 time, it should say it once. If it's 0, it shouldn't say anything. Great, so now it works. This is a while loop, so that means whenever this condition is true, you keep eating it. So let's add another thing. Say you're on a diet, which is a Boolean, either true or false. What if we don't want to eat apples at all if we are on a diet? So while apple remaining is bigger than 0, we're gonna eat apple. And if you're not on a diet, so not on diet. Okay. All right, so eat apples. So even if I have 8 apples and you write on diet is true, then you're not gonna eat any apples. But if it's false, you're gonna eat it 8 times. So there you go. So now you know how to use while loops, and actually with the things you know now, it's actually pretty powerful. You can do a lot of things with it. Basically, the fundamental of programming is functions, control flow, loops, variables. All of these things you will see everywhere in programming. And with those basic steps, you can actually do most of the logical things. Anything else is just abstraction, doing things a little bit easier and then having a lot of different infrastructure. But in the end, that's how a computer thinks. You give it conditions, if-else statements, you give it loops, while statements, you give it variables, you give it some values, and then with that, a computer can do a lot of things. All right, that's pretty much it for control flow. Thank you, and see you in the next one.